Welcome to Bottom Up, a monthly podcast dedicated to issues and topics of interest to young lawyers in Wisconsin and beyond. I'm your host, Emil Ovbiagele. Welcome to our listeners. I know we always talk about exciting guests and everyone's awesome, but we have a truly phenomenal guest.
We do.
And this one's very special to us.
Very much so.
We have the actual man behind the show, Bottom Up, the producer, communications director of the State Bar of Wisconsin, the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Forward himself here today. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You guys are too kind.
We're so happy to have you. I honestly don't know when I met Joe. I don't know, Emil, if you can pinpoint when you met Joe, but I was very excited when he got this position. And Joe, kudos to you because you've done some really cool and innovative things. This podcast, for one, as an in-house lawyer, you've made this effort to kind of include transactional lawyers in all the state bar communications, and that's awesome. So I knew you would do great at this, and we're really happy to have you. Joe's blushing for those who can't see him, but so he's awesome. So he's done a lot of great things for the state bar.
I appreciate that. And thank you guys so much for agreeing to co-host. You guys have been great so far, so I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and you inspire me. I just want you to know that your humility and your ability to be a team player and help amplify people is just second to none. I remember one of the first times we worked together was on a potential article, and I'm like, hey, I don't have time to write this stuff. And you're like, hey, don't worry, I'll just ask you some questions and I'll help you out. And I was a little shy about it, and you were able to help me think of myself as, hey, yeah, I could write a Wisconsin, I could write an article for the magazine. Oh, and by the way, Joe's also the editor of the Wisconsin Lawyer magazine. Right. And you've done this, I know, for so many people, and you are an embodiment of the amazing staff that we have at the State Bar. Yeah. And, on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you. Thank you for everything that you guys do. Thank you for everything that you do. And we are blessed to have you at the State Bar, and very excited to have you here today. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Emil. I appreciate that.
So, Joe, I know you don't like talking about yourself very much, but we're going to make you talk about yourself.
Yes, you have to.
So, Joe, you're a lawyer so I want you to talk to us about how you ended up at the State Bar. You can take us as far back as you want to and whenever you want to.
Sure.
It's your show.
Sure. I guess it started when I was 5. No, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I went to college in Ohio at the University of Dayton. I was an English major. And, after college, I worked in the newspaper industry. I was a sports reporter and did some other reporting. And, eventually I saw what was happening in the newspaper industry, and I decided I need to do something different. So with the English degree and looking at different things, I thought law school would be a good place to go. And so, I never really thought of myself as a lawyer, or I didn't set out to go to law school when I was in college or anything, but it just seemed like a logical path for me. And so I attended St. Louis University Law School, and I graduated in 2010, which was not a good time for lawyers. It was the Great Recession was happening. The jobs had dried up. If you were, in the top 5%, 10% of your class, you were struggling to find something. And it just so happened that I wanted to go back to Wisconsin. My family's from Wisconsin. My family is here. I wanted to raise kids here and have a family here in Wisconsin. So I was looking for jobs, and this legal writing position came up for the State Bar of Wisconsin. And I applied, and they brought me up for an interview, and I got the job. And I've been working at the State Bar since 2010. So in about a year and a half ago, our boss, Joyce Hastings, retired, and that the director of communications job opened up, and I applied for it, and I got that job, and now I'm sitting here. So, that's my short path to where I am right now. But I do have, a lot of writing background and the law degree, which helps me navigate the legal profession and what is needed and what lawyers need and how we can showcase lawyers and what we can do to help them in their careers.
Yeah, and thanks for that background. Talking about your writing, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons we have you here today is because of a recent piece you just authored for the Wisconsin Lawyer magazine in the closing sections, or at least final thought sections of the magazine. I think it was the January edition. It was a philosophical piece, a deep piece that can be best described as the idea of seizing the moment. In what we do as lawyers, we're very concrete. We deal with all of this, white and black, or we're dealing with substance of the law. We're talking about all of these professional topics, and it's all about the career of the law and practicing within the law. You wrote an article that shocked us out of our norm. They made us think about something beyond the law. And I don't want to give it away because I want you to talk about it, but it was precipitated by this near-death experience you had late last year that led you to certain realizations. So can you talk about the article, and then we're going to ask some questions after that.
Yeah, and I wrote this because we had a space and we couldn't find someone to write this final thought, and I had to step in and write it, and I was thinking about what I could write about, and I had recalled recently, it was late November, that I was on my lunch break from work, and I was driving to get a haircut, and I was on the interstate highway, and I'm in the right lane, and there's a semi truck on my left, and I'm going down the highway, and I see up ahead another truck. It's stalled on the right shoulder, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do here? So I started to sort of speed up, but then as we approached the truck on the shoulder on the right, the truck on my left started to merge into my lane, okay? And I slammed on the brakes, and the truck merged, the driver of the truck merged right in front of me. I mean, he was very close. If I wouldn't have slammed on the brakes a second or two later, he would have pinned me into the truck on the shoulder, and I would have been dead. There's no question about it, because I was going about 70, 75 miles an hour. Even if I slammed on the brakes, I was still going too fast.
Yeah. And
after that moment, I kept driving, and I slowed down, and I kind of was, I didn't know what was going on, and I kind of was, I just had to catch my breath, and as I kept going down the road, my thoughts weren't like, they went to a place that I didn't really think they would go. I mean, I guess I'd never had an experience like that, but I just kept thinking, what if I did die? What would life be like and for my family?
Mm-hmm.
And, would they look back and say, Joe did all he could in life. He took care of us. He did the best he could. He fulfilled his dreams. He put in place a life that we could live moving forward without him. And I started to think about my own life and whether that would be true. There are things that have happened in the course of your life in the last decade or two that maybe you wouldn't be able to say that. Maybe you didn't try as hard as you could. Maybe you didn't do the things that you should have done or take care of yourself in the way that you should have. And there's a lot there when you think about those things. And I will say that I got more of a response on this article than I have on any article that I've ever written. And I've written more than 1,000 articles since I've been at the state bar. And I think there's a few reasons for that, because there's a few themes and this it's very short. It's only 500 words, but there's several themes going on. One is that life is really delicate, and I think people sometimes forget that you could wake up today and something could happen to you and you could die. It's as easy as stepping out in front of a curb and getting hit by a bus. I mean, that happens to people.
Yeah.
People get illnesses and cancer. My sister died of cancer when she was 37 when I was in law school. None of us think that's going to happen until we're gone. So I think that message, resonates with people. It's like, you have to realize that you could be gone tomorrow. Yeah. The second theme, I think, is that in the course of life, you can be led astray. You can get off course. People do get off course, especially for attorneys who are, it's a stressful profession. They're type A people. They're working at a high level, and it's easy to do things that derail you from your goals. A lot of attorneys, whether they want to admit it or not, probably identify with that theme. So that's the second theme. And the third theme, though, and the one that's positive, is you can recalibrate. You can change. You can get back to where you want to be. Set a new goal and set a new path and get back on track. It's possible. And so that was sort of a moment for me. It was like, get back on track and fulfill what you set out to do when you were young and when you had these goals. Don't just get on this track of, the mundane life. Like, there are things that you want to do them now, because you don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Who better to trust when you're facing a malpractice claim than Wilmick? With their Wisconsin licensed claims attorneys and strong network of defense counsel, find peace of mind with Wilmick, supporting and partnering with Wisconsin law firms since 1986.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Yeah, and that's just so powerful. I read this article and I reached out to you personally, and I think, yes, I think a lot of lawyers and everyone most people who read that article saw or could identify, they saw certain aspects of themselves in it. And against your wishes, and I had to plead with you to come on here to talk about this, but I think it's important because this piece is so powerful because it's vulnerable. It shows, and that's something that we as lawyers struggle with. We are all in professions in areas where people look up to us for answers. And I think that's why you've gotten the responses that you have, because most readers can see themselves in this article. They can see the fact that maybe they haven't taken into account the delicateness of life, in working in the industry that we're in, going as fast as we do. And it's really hard for lawyers to be vulnerable because of what we do. We're in professions and we're in sectors where people look to us for answers. I often tell people that I'm not Catholic, but I said if I were to go to confessions, it'd be like, Father, I haven't sinned, but the shit that I know, sorry, beep that again. The stuff that because there's a lot of secondary trauma too from the job, but guess what? We have to be strong, right? We walk into any room, we come into crisis mode or crisis situations. Clients look to us. We're problem solvers, right? And so being vulnerable is not something that comes easy to us, right? We hedge. When was the last time you heard a lawyer say, I'm sorry? We don't say sorry. We give explanations. It's one of my friends who's married to a lawyer, tells me that one of the biggest problems she has is it's really hard for us. There's always an explanation. There's always a head. It's just by training, right? And I don't think we understand or we know what that does to us. And so I think it was important. I think it's important to have you here and highlight the story to say, hey, it's okay to kind of just pause. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to wonder about your impact. It's okay to realize that maybe we've not been we've not lived up to what we expect of ourselves, right? That was my big takeaway after reading this heartfelt story. You talked about the three themes this incident helped you realize. One, that life is delicate. Two, along the journey of life, we may get led astray. And three, we can always recalibrate and get back on the paths that we are. Let me ask you this. After going through this experience, did you form any thoughts on the impact of disruption? What I mean by that is people tend to not think about these things during their day-to-day stream of business or consciousness while life is going the way it's supposed to be going. Oftentimes, these moments of realization come in great moments of disruptions, right? A near-death experience, some pain, right? A divorce or something. What is it about these moments that forces lawyers or people to think about their lives or reflect upon, their experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it just, again, it makes you look back and think, if I wasn't here anymore, did I leave something undone? Did I, in your last podcast, Emil, you said, I think you said something like, the ones that we love the most are the ones we don't tell enough, or something like that. It's like the classic story of the father and son. How when you're a son, there are so many things you want to say to your father, or if you're a father, there are so many things you wanted to say to your son. And I think when you have a moment like this, it makes you think and reconsider why waiting is something you shouldn't do, because if you wait, the moment could be gone and you never got to say what you got to say. You never got to do what you wanted to do. Again, we only have one life, and it's very short. Make the most of it. And I think when you at least for me, when I had this moment, I looked back and I was like, what have you done in the last decade? What can you be proud of? What can your family be proud of you for? And there are a lot of things that I am proud of, whether it's my career, whether it's my family, but there are other things that you're like, you could have done things better. And if you're gone tomorrow, there's nothing you can do about it. And so I think it was just it's a jarring moment to make you kind of rethink what's important in life. And so I say it in the article. It's like in the moments after that, and even now, and it's true now. I'm still thinking about it. It's like, what do you need to do today to change so that in tomorrow or in a week from now or in a month from now or in 10 years from now, you can say that you did the best that you could?
I'm just thinking, you don't have to share everything, Joe, but what's at least one thing or two things that you thought, right now I am going to make these conscious changes in order to change this for my life going forward?
And now, a word from our sponsors.
State Bar of Wisconsin members have access to affordable insurance plans, including term life, accident, critical illness, and accidental death and dismemberment. Coverage is issued by the Prudential Insurance Company of America. For more information, visit wisbar.memberenroll.com.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Yeah, well, for me, because I'm a father with two young kids, it was just a reminder that this time with them, while they're this young and they're still present and in the house, means that I have to take every moment to make sure that I'm spending time with them and teaching them and making sure that I'm preparing them for life, because I'm responsible for that. And that's a heavy weight to carry. And I think sometimes as a parent, you get burned out, frustrated, and you just, sometimes, to be quite honest, you don't want to be a parent, but you took that responsibility on. And so for me, it was looking at the different ways that I could be a better parent and be more present for my kids and making sure I'm teaching them and exposing them to all different things. And importantly, in order for me to do that, I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of my body. I have to take care of it's a cliche to say it, but it's the mind, body, spirit. So you have to take care of your mind and keep your mind active and intellectually stimulated. I think lawyers don't have a problem with that because of their day-to-day activities, constant stimulation of the mind. but almost sometimes probably overstimulation. But, you know, the body, so I could do a better job of eating better, more exercise, drinking less, you know, all the things that we talk about with health and wellness and the well-being. Those things are also present for me, and things that I need to think about. And then spirit, that's a big one for me. And I talked about just kind of getting into a mundane routine. For me, I have to find ways to break out of that, and whether that's finding different hobbies or, you know, learning how to play the guitar or volunteering more for local organizations, giving back through pro bono activities, or things like that that are going to make you spiritually more fulfilled. Those are the kinds of things that I started to think more about as a result of this experience. And I think that's a really good step for me. For other people, they may not have kids, so they're not thinking about that in those terms, but you can think about it in those terms in different ways and how it applies to your own life. Those are some of my goals. I think for a lot of attorneys in the legal profession in general, well-being is a big issue, drinking especially.
But no one wants to say that.
Right.
No, I think it's embedded in the Wisconsin culture. So, for example, I never realized how much we drink in Wisconsin and how much of that we think is normal until I have family members come from out of state, right? So, if you know, in DC or in other cities, right, you go to happy hour, you're probably going to have max 2, right? Wisconsin, a typical happy hour is like 4 drinks. 5. And my cousin's look is like, oh no, it's just, you know, we just drink 2 drinks out here, right? And you're right, because I think it's so normalized, no one wants to talk about it, and it's not even seen as a problem. And I think the State Bar too has been doing a lot of great work in that regard, and trying to get lawyers to be more vulnerable and seek out the help that they do need, and to not be isolationist. Now, while that is true, it's not the help and the resources. I think sometimes the practice itself needs to look at what makes lawyers drink. What is it about what we do and how we practice that makes this such a stressful profession? So, for example, I have had cases or incidents where, you know, I reach out to a judge and I say, hey, Your Honor, I'm dealing with this personal stuff with my family and all that stuff, and there's a deadline, and I are opposing counsel, and I'm like, hey, can we extend this for another month or so, whatever? You know, there's really nothing of consequence going on, and opposing counsel would fight tooth and nail. And once upon a time, it so happened to be an individual who had appeared on a wellness panel talking about wellness and stress and all that stuff, and I'm like, you're such a hypocrite. You're the reason lawyers drink. It's the people. It's so these judges and these lawyers can talk about wellness, but if you're not given accommodations when needed because life happens and you want to put everybody through the ringers, what do you think the outcome's going to be? You know, we're dealing with demands that we've never dealt with before at a pace that has never been seen before. This is across all works of life, right? With technology and all that stuff, we're trying to juggle it all. We're in a country, for example, where child care isn't free, where health care isn't free, right? There's so many other societal benefits we don't have. We have to juggle these things. And in a vacuum, lawyers make decisions, or sometimes judges make decisions to not be as graceful as they potentially can be. Now, in my experience, I would say most judges tend to be very allowing. It's usually other lawyers at times who, you know, and we don't think about what impact that has, you know, on us. So I just think that that's something that's important to just sort of note, because, you know, we can talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk and look out for each other. And you can kind of add this part, and this is a story I really want to tell. I had a situation where I had a call with a lawyer scheduled for discovery responses. All right, so discovery responses usually do 30 days after they're sent. I'd asked for a 5 to 6 day or 10 day extension, and the attorney gave it to me initially. Now, this is before the scheduling order had been issued, so this case is kind of new. We were supposed to talk 10 days afterwards. A couple of hours before, I got called in to my daughter's school. She was sick, and I had to go get her, and ended up going to the hospital. And opposing counsel sent me this email. I said, hey, I'm sorry, I'm dealing with some personal emergencies. Can we please postpone this? This is during the holidays till about January, about 2 weeks. There's really nothing happening. There's no scheduling order yet in the case. There's no real emergency, you know. And I had to read this diatribe response of, hey, well, you said this. I already gave you these extensions and all that stuff. So I responded back in a moment. I'm like, how the hell could I have planned that my daughter was going to be in the hospital? I couldn't plan for that. And I don't think I should have to explain that to you. So I literally told the other lawyer, I'm like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to talk to you after the New Year's. You want to file a damn motion? File your motion. I'm not dealing. I'm like, that's the last. Call me on this day, or don't talk to me at all. But these little stressors, I think, are important to know. That's why we're so stressed.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Russell Nicolay here with Nicolay Law, Accident and Injury Lawyers. If you have clients that have been injured, my office would love the opportunity to help them get compensated and get their life back on track. We handle referrals and co-counsel relationships on injury cases all across Wisconsin.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
And I will say this kind of, because we're talking in dry January. I don't know when this is going to air, but we're talking in dry January, and there have been a lot more conscious efforts to not just address drinking challenges in this profession, but just period, especially in a place like Wisconsin. So there are a lot of, we're here in Milwaukee. Today we're shooting at the Milwaukee Bar Association. Shout out to the Milwaukee Bar for letting us be here again. And there are a lot of places in Milwaukee that offer mocktails or they're dry-only bars. A favorite in my neighborhood, Honeybee Sage, it's a Black woman-owned, and they have delicious mocktails in there. So if you're looking for an alternative, especially when that's such a social aspect of the culture here, they're in their regular bars and regular restaurants where you can order a mocktail. My good friend Eric Kennedy has kind of shown me the ropes on all the mocktails. I just like eating and drinking everything. So if it's whatever, just like I like vegan food, I'm not vegan. I like everything. So I like to try the mocktails. So I appreciate that there's more intentionality behind addressing an issue like that, because lots of people, you're right, Joe, they don't want to say it, but they have this goal for health reasons. We're getting older. We can't drink like we used to. All these things to have some alternatives. Do you have anything else you want to share that you're going to change differently?
Well, let me think about that. But there was one I did want to point out that you mentioned, I think in the last podcast, Kristen, that you're an introvert, and I'm an introvert, and so when I was in college and law school, and even now, part of it is, drinking helps you become an extrovert,
Right.
and especially for lawyers who have to do networking and have to, be available and have to be, sort of act in an extroverted manner in many situations, they can find themselves probably relying on alcohol as a way to compensate for that. And so I think, especially now when we, younger attorneys are coming up, they're used to the internet and cell phones and social media and not really interacting in the ways that we maybe did when we were that age. And so, that could be a source, that could be a root cause of some of the issues that younger attorneys may face when they get into those situations where they need to be considered an extrovert. And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to do that?
And now, a word from our sponsors. Are you struggling with work-life balance issues? Could you use some help addressing these challenges? WISLAP offers confidential well-being support to lawyers, judges, and law students. With trained peer volunteers, structured well-being resources, and individualized support services, WISLAP aims to foster work-life balance within the Wisconsin legal community. Find us on the web at wisbar.org/WISLAP. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
This phrase from the article sticks, or this paragraph, and I want to just read it. It's in an article. You write, in those seconds before certain death, life did not flash before my eyes, as some say is common. I did not see my childhood. I did not smell the summer cut grass, feel the warmth of sunshine, and taste the orange fruit. I did not hear the music play. What flashed or maybe what resonated in the seconds, minutes, hours, and days after, and still now, was the future without me? Did I do enough in life for my spirit to live in death? Did I plan for my family's well-being? Would they remember how much I loved them because I showed them? Would they be proud of me? Did I work hard enough to reach my potential? Did I live it all on the field? That's powerful.
It's powerful stuff, really.
I you know, what I noticed was missing here wasn't. Oh, what I noticed you didn't ask yourself was how many articles have I written?
Did I hit
how,
that
how
deadline?
many cases? You know.
Yeah.
It's so funny how, I mean, what we do is very important, yes, but it's so funny how in that moment your thoughts transcended your vocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the lines that you just read, I think, again, your career is interwoven into that. So when I do well in my career, in my profession, it's going to benefit my family. And so, but my primary focus is always going to be on them. And so, but even for those who don't have kids, it's like, what is it that you're working for?
Right.
Why are you working so hard? You know, because it can't just be about work. It has to be about something more. Or maybe not. I don't know. But for me, it is something more. I'm working because I'm working for my family to give them more opportunity.
I love that you said that, Joe. That's something I've contemplated as I've gotten older a lot, because it's very easy to get wrapped up in this profession, and you're doing it for notoriety, or you're doing it for, people say, legacy, and I think we've talked about that before, like whatever that means, or you're doing it for money, and you have to remember, like, the world is so much bigger than you and I and us in this room. So why are we doing all of these things? It has to be for something more than so I can have a nice house or, whatever. It has to be something more, right? And I think we all do ourselves a disservice by not being still and thinking about what those things are. And I have dedicated a lot of my time, especially with probably a little bit before the pandemic, but especially with the pandemic having all this shelter in place time, to think about those things deeply, and to not get so caught up. We were talking offline about, why some people stay in this profession well beyond the time of retirement. And I think a big reason is because our identities become being lawyers, or our identities are working people. And we look up one day and realize, oh, I don't have an identity outside of that. Like, okay, yeah, I got the kids and the wife, all right, they exist, but I have dedicated the majority of my time to this thing, practicing and being really good at this thing, or I like being judge, whomever, and we have forgotten our purpose in that. Like, the purpose is not that, it's something greater. So it's profound to talk about, but I really hope that someone is listening and that it makes them stop and be still and think about what we do all of this for. What's the real reason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the delicateness of life, I resonate with that a lot. I tell people that my entire life has been shaped by the impermanence of life. I lost my father when I was 13. My father died at 47 due to a sudden heart attack. Had a heart attack at a conference full of surgeons. My father was a neurosurgeon. If you think the best place to have a heart attack would be, but I come to realize when it's your time, it's your time. And ever since, I've been shaped by that experience, understanding that nothing's guaranteed and nothing's promised. And so it takes me to the Hamilton, who's seen the Hamilton show, Broadway show. There's a song where Hamilton's writing, and it's like, why do you write like you're running out of time? Mm-hmm. In a very weird, sad way, and maybe awesome way, I do live my life sometimes like I'm running out of time. And so folks are like, hey, yeah, like, you know, I mean, I think, Kristen, something you probably gotten, like why you going so far so fast? Like, you know, and it's like, well, I have these opportunities, right? And so I don't want to look and have that moment where life flashes before my eyes, and I know, and I feel like I didn't take the bull by the horn, I didn't seize the moment. And yes, it does take a toll, but figuring out what your purpose is and figuring out how to treat the delicateness of life, like you said, needs to be focused on, well, what is this all for on some level? And that's a very deep question. That's a lifetime of trying to answer that question. But we must contend, because an unexamined life isn't worth living. And I think what a lot of lawyers end up doing is we get into that groove, 10 years comes, 20 years comes, 30 years come, and we don't examine. You know, just because you liked something 20 years ago doesn't mean you have to still be doing it in that same capacity, right? It could be, maybe your time's better served maybe teaching. Maybe it's better serving other lawyers, right? And I think I think doctors are probably the other category of professionals. They get so engrossed in what they do in their vocation that it tramps, I'm doing this to my family. It becomes the thing they're living for. Yep. I think we all have to guard against that. And I think sometimes we do fall prey to over focusing on our vocation and not the other things that, like, you know, as Kristen would say, that it fills our cup. Because there is more to life than just being a lawyer. I tell people there's more to life than being a father. There's more to life than being a spouse. There's more to life than being a friend. There's more to life than being a son. It's all of these things that makes life. Yes. And so I told my wife, I'm like, hey, like, I love our children, but we can't dedicate our entire lives to these little chaps who, when they turn 18, may or may not give us the middle finger.
But you hope they go and live their own lives.
Exactly.
That's the point, right?
Yeah. So it is a part, and I know that was a long diatribe.
Well, but you want to give them the tools.
Absolutely.
Right.
So after they give you the finger, they can at least,
To be self-sufficient.
I hope they don't. But meaning, we have to understand that is a part of our lives. It's not the entirety of our lives.
I agree.
Me being a lawyer, you being a lawyer, you work in the state, it's a part of our lives. And I told my wife, I said, hey, you realize, like, you're like the only person I get to spend the rest of my life with that I chose. I didn't pick my parents. I didn't pick my siblings. I didn't pick my kids. And so on some level, can we make this pact that, yes, there will be phases. Can we at least honor and always put this at the forefront, getting to know each other, and stick in, or at least doing the things that made us fall in love in the first place. I don't mean to get all sappy, but it's about that trying to ensure that, or at least that one's living a complete life as much as possible. And for me, as it relates to the impact or what life's all about, I've drilled it down to, in every conversation that I have, or not every, but in most conversations that I have, most people that I meet, whether it be clients, friends, my sisters, my mother, I want to amplify. I want to give what I have to give. I want to say, hey, on some level, I was made a little bit better with that experience or that conversation I once had, right, with Emil, or what he did, or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, that's where we live on, because I could be in different continents, and my father has friends everywhere, and I still have people who would call me. On my wedding, I had my father's friends who I had never seen before who showed up. Mm-hmm. And because of what Victor meant to them, and say, hey, you know what? Sometimes he was a jerk, but that guy never lied. He always told you the truth. Like, those were powerful things to say. My dad, people would tell me my father was incapable of lying. Like, he just, when he caught him with cigarettes when he was 16 years old, and his mother caught him with cigarettes, most kids would try to lie. It was like in his pocket and all. And he's like, oh yeah, Mom, I've been smoking for a little bit now, I mean, it was wrong, but like, that was how, and he was always known for that. He was always blunt. He was the type of guy who got away with the things that I could, there's some people who have this natural gift. They could say all sorts of crazy stuff and everyone laughs. You say the exact same thing as your head on a spike.
Right.
But I think back to that, and it's about, it's about leaving an impact and fulfilling these different aspects and seizing the moment, as you say.
Absolutely.
And now, a word from our sponsors. In these uncertain economic times, the State Bar of Wisconsin wants to make sure that you and your practice have the best available tools. Ultimate Pass and Books Unbound are available for purchase using 6-month installment plans. Contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 for more information.
One thing that is important to recognize is that you can recalibrate at any time. And as you get older, your life changes and you have different goals and you want different things and you have different skills as time goes on. And so I think it's really important to take time, whether it's after a near-death experience or just making it a part of your daily routine to try and figure that out and to do that throughout life, as things change. Because, what you wanted as a 20-year-old is not what you want when you're 40.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely. I read this book. I can't think of the name of it, but it was about mimetic desire. And that's the idea of we just kind of want what the person next to us wants. And we never, I forget the way that they phrased it, but basically we kind of live at the surface level, like the average person thinks at a surface level. And we, even with ourselves in our own lives, we don't dig deeper than the surface, mainly because of noise, right? The noise of what your mom wants you to be when you grow up, and then what your spouse wants you to be at work, and then what your kids idolize you as, or whatever it is. We do this thing where it's, well, Emil opened up his own law firm. Maybe I should do that. Like, and you don't even know if you want to do that, but you did it. And everyone's saying it sounds cool, so I'm going to go do it. And as I read that book, which was really interesting, I kept thinking a lot about like, wow, when's the last time, if you think about all the choices that you have made in life, how many of them were on your own? Like, yes, we're influenced by a lot of things, but how many things have you come to because you said, no, this is something I really want to do? I mean, maybe lunch, maybe you really, and even that can be influenced by what's there in front of you to eat, more than this is what I want to do. So I think all of this kind of goes back to, and I said it earlier, like thinking deeply, but challenging people to get beyond the surface. And when you do that, it's easier to pivot. It's easier to say, okay, I'm going to recalibrate. It's been 10 years. I've been doing this thing. Now what do I want to do? Not what does everybody around me want to do or the people I bump shoulders with do, but what do I want to do? And I really respect people that leave professions like this one, like law or doctors, and they go, I want to do something different. Like I know so many people like that who are just like, I didn't want to do that anymore. So, and why is that so crazy that they said, hey, this is where my life is now. I want to go move across the country and teach yoga. Cool. I love it. Because it's really hard because of mimetic desire, the way that we have been kind of raised in this community to just kind of do what the next person does. So I don't really have a real point, just beyond saying I want people to think deeply about what they want to do and recalibrate every couple of years. And I don't know what that looks like for you, if it's journaling or, I don't know, setting a goal.
Taking a vacation by yourself to London.
There you go.
Very important.
Sure. If you have that privilege to go ahead and go to London for a week and recalibrate, then hey, do that.
You go to Montana.
You can go to your basement and sit with yourself for an hour in quiet time and think, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? And you have to keep doing that, or else you're literally on autopilot. And a lot of people are right now, like just autopilot.
A phrase comes to mind as you say that, Kristen. Living a life by design.
Mm-hmm.
Like that concept, right? And every designer is constantly looking, they're constantly tweaking. Right, and obviously, sometimes you may review your life, and you don't have to change anything.
Right.
But it's the act of pausing to dig deeper. Is this what I want, or is this what society or people say I should want? And even if it is what I want, how does this align with what my philosophies are, the things that I hold dear? Right? Because if you say, for example, the family is important to you, or that, giving back is important to you, and then you do an analysis of your time and you realize I don't spend any time
with
family. Spend that time. And honestly, I want to also, there's a caveat, right? Like, you can't have everything at the same time.
Right.
So there must be a plan. So, for example, I know I don't spend as much time, right now at this point in my career with my family as I want to. And I made a vow, and my wife and I, we talked about this. We have our busy careers, and we said, hey, we're doing this so in about 10 years, 10 years, my first daughter will be 14, the other one will be 12, and then my last would be like 11. We want to be there during those, like from 11 to 18, those years. I want to make every game I possibly can, right? But I also know that in order to have the luxury to do that, I got to do certain things today.
There's a purpose. There's a purpose for what you're doing right now. And it's not just because you want to be important or you want to get to the top of your profession, although that could possibly happen because you're working really hard. But you have a purpose. You have something else that you're working towards, and I think that's really important for people to have, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Why?
The why.
Why?
What's your why?
You constantly asking, why am I doing this?
It's interesting how I feel like it's controversial to say that, but we really need to do a better job of pushing that in this profession to think about why you're doing what you want to do and making sure you don't want to be partner just because the person next to you is partner, or a judge because your mom thinks that'd be cool if you were judge, or your dad always envisioned you being a judge. You have to think about the why.
That said, obviously lawyers do really, really important work. And if we didn't have lawyers, we wouldn't have the safeguards that we have in society. And so we think about these things, but we also have to recognize that lawyers are doing really, really important work every single day. And that's why people like Peter and I think enjoy working at the State Bar, because we get to help attorneys every day. I work on the magazine. It's like I get to interact with attorneys every single day and say, how can I help you? If you write this article, you can get your name out there, then you can do more. And so, there's so many different ways to look at things. And but I think it is really important to answer that question: why am I doing this? Is it because I know this work is important? Is it because in 5 or 10 years from now I want to do A, B, or C, or whatever the case may be? But I think you don't have to wait for a near-death experience to think about that.
That's awesome.
Want to wrap this one up, Kristen?
Yeah.
I'm just feeling all emotional.
No, this is a really good episode.
I should go drink some coffee and stare into the abyss.
Get you a nice mocktail and finish out the day. Joe, thank you so much for lending us your time. As always, you and Peter are awesome for always coming here and helping with the podcast and all the wonderful things that you do for lawyers, diverse lawyers, getting our faces and names kind of in these spaces. So we appreciate it. And what an awesome story, and just knowing more about you, despite knowing you all these years, learning all these very deep things about you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. From now, you shall be known as Joe the Philosopher Forward.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you very much for everything. All right, and we're out. Until next time. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, let us know. I'm your host, Emil Ovbiagele, and we'll catch you next time.